Israel is using that opportunity, our money, our weapons, the lives of our soldiers, to expand its territory. And no one in the U.S. government has told them to stop. And because we're not doing that with Israel, the Israelis feel completely free, not simply to make public announcements that they're going to pursue their own interests to the detriment of ours.
Tucker Carlson just exposed Israel's nefarious scheme to expand its own territory, as it's doing in Lebanon right now, in the middle of a U.S.-led regime change operation in Iran, where it looks like U.S. boots on the ground, not IDF boots on the ground, are going to be part of a ground invasion force. Tucker breaks this down and explains why this is such a slap in the face of American sovereignty and of American values. So let's take a look at that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
It's universally recognized at this point, pretty much, that continuing this war with Iran is not in the identifiable interest of the United States. We don't get anything out of continuing it by anyone's measure. And if you doubt that, ask yourself, when was the last time someone explained coolly and without emotion, maybe with bullet points or a PowerPoint, how exactly we win if this goes on longer? There's no real argument to be made. The United States does not win if this goes on longer, and no one can claim otherwise. People can jump up and down and attack you for asking, but they can't tell you rationally how you're going to be safer and more prosperous, how your children will lead better lives here in the United States if this goes on. So everybody knows it's in our interest to wrap this up in a way that protects core American interests, of course, that avoids unnecessary humiliation, that brings some stability to the region, as they say, but wrap it up. And the administration understands this. The Trump administration clearly understands this, because news reports just in the last 24 hours have told us that the president is thinking about, or planning to, depending on who you believe, dispatch the vice president to hammer out some kind of deal with the Iranians. And if that happens, and we don't know, just repeating what we read, then that's a pretty clear sign that the administration wants to declare victory and move on, or certainly to move on. And they probably couldn't pick a more credible person to do it. Ideology aside, the vice president is smart, he's honest. He's not one of the people who's gotten richer in government service. He's probably one of the people who got poorer in government service, which is a pretty good measure of someone's moral rectitude. And he understands power dynamics.
Okay, so he is glazing J.D. Vance. Of course, his son works for him. I'm not a fan of J.D. Vance. We'll leave that aside for now. It does seem like there's rumblings of rumors that Pakistan wants to broker peace agreements between the United States and Iran. Now, that Trump has said we're talking to a top guy in Iran without saying who that is, doesn't seem to be true. The Iranians denying it flatly, and Trump never having a plausible explanation about who he's talking about. It seems like the Iranians don't want a ceasefire. They don't want brokered agreements, but there's no real name demonstrated source for this story, that they want J.D. Vance to broker this deal. And I have to say, the window of opportunity is here for this to be something that potentially separates J.D. Vance from this administration that has launched this war to try to orchestrate this, where J.D. Vance is somehow made into a peacemaker and then doesn't have to take all the dirt that's been rightly shoveled upon the Trump administration during this term for having launched this disastrous war in the first place, that he could separate himself in 2028 and run. That might be in the cards for orchestration, but there's no confirmation that that's exactly who the Iranians want. I don't think they differentiate to that level. J.D. Vance is in the administration that's pummeling them right now with missiles and downing naval vessels and talking about a ground invasion. So that's where we're at here. We'll have to see if this pans out, but it doesn't seem like any negotiation is really on the table right now. And I don't think J.D. Vance is capable. He enriched himself through Peter Thiel and his venture capital firm, Mithril, who is now in government and could profit off future contracts with J.D. Vance, what if he does win the presidency. So I got to just disagree with Tucker on that one.
And so we are praying for that, praying that that works, that the two sides, or multiple sides really, can come to terms and end this and stop the death of innocents or combatants for that matter, and stop the destruction of critical infrastructure and restore stability to global energy markets and basically make peace. Anyone who doesn't want that should answer the question, like, why don't you want that? So we're very much hoping that J.D. Vance can get that done sometime soon.
Well, I'm hopeful for peace. I don't think that it will come through J.D. Vance or through any decision that isn't based on the Iranians allowing it to happen. They're saying they don't want peace, but I'm as emphatic as Tucker Carlson about the desire for peace. That's what I'll say categorically, no qualifiers on that one.
But in order to do that, he's going to, or the administration will have to, do one thing first, which is a prerequisite to any kind of settlement, or really any kind of ending to this conflict that benefits the United States, and that's constrain its partner in this war, apparently its full partner, which is Israel.
Good luck.
You can't get what you want unless you constrain Israel. It's not an attack on Israel. It's just noting what's very obvious, which is that every nation has unique interests. And when you pair up with another nation in a war, particularly one that could flower into a global conflict, you're probably hoping for different outcomes because you're different countries. There's nothing weird about that. Israel is not the same as the United States, despite what they may tell you. It's different and they have different goals. And so as we assess this 15 years from now, hopefully in a prosperous, thriving country, we try to figure out how that happened. The two decisions we probably should be zeroed in on and most anxious to apportion blame for are, number one, killing the Ayatollah in the very opening moments, which immediately limited the possibility of a negotiated settlement, turned what could have been a narrow objective, get rid of Iran's nuclear program, constrain its ability to build more missiles, whatever, into something much larger.
Well, that's one of the predominant reasons why, ideally, I agree. It'd be nice if the U.S. ever uses leverage to constrain Israel, but are they really a constrainable force at this point? Yeah, I would love for the United States under the Trump administration to constrain Israel, but that's like saying you have to make pigs fly. Israel doesn't seem to be constrainable. We've seen that in Gaza, especially, where forces not only in the bureaucracy, but in Congress and in the presidency made excuses for that and did nothing when Israel bombed Qatar. It doesn't seem like they're a constrainable force. On the contrary, it seems like Israel has much more success in constraining the United States and shifting it to the parameters it wants for regional domination. That's exactly what this war in Iran is, where the so-called vassal state, which is a comical term for Israel, seems to weigh in much more to our country's decision-making than vice versa. It doesn't seem to be a constrainable force, but again, like, that's the ideal. I'm with them there. It just seems a little bit idealistic. No, the better route is not just try to constrain Israel. We all see how that works. It's to cut and sever and decouple from this toxic and unholy alliance for good. No more entangling alliances. That what should be the course.
Potentially a war against a nation itself or a war against a religion itself. So no sober person would have recommended that, and we probably should find out how that happened. Not because we love the Ayatollah, but because we love the United States, and it's hard to see how that was good for us. And the second decision, maybe even more important, was the decision to go into this joined at the hip to another nation, in this case, Israel. That was never going to work. It couldn't work. It just doesn't make any sense. So whoever made that decision, well, the president, of course, made the decision, but who advised the president to do that? How did that happen? You're, of course, discouraged from asking how anything happened. You're supposed to just accept things, be shocked by them, get over them, get with the program, and no one is encouraged to ask why.
Yeah, who convinced President Trump to do that? Who could have done that? I don't know. I have no idea.
How? It's almost like a father, a hungover dad brushing off an inquisitive 5-year-old. Stop asking why. But we're not 5-year-olds. We're American citizens. So we have an absolute right to know why our country was put to bad use, to our detriment. And so don't be intimidated when people tell you, shut up, or that's classified. No, we have a right to know how that decision was made because it didn't help us at all. And as a product of that decision, we're putting an awful lot at risk. So constraining Israel, bringing it to heel. It's a much smaller country than the United States. We pay for most of their military. We make all of this possible, so it shouldn't be hard to tell them to get in line, at least for the purposes of this conflict. Don't do things that violate our core interests. But so far, no one's been able to do that for some reason. Again, that's another why proposition. Why? Why?
Because it actually is the hardest thing to do because of the impulses behind the lobby and the billionaires who support it, who prop it up, who Trump boasts about siding with, giving Miriam Adelson and Sheldon Adelson everything they wanted, hugging Netanyahu, considering him a hero, pleading with the Knesset to drop charges. That's why it's the hardest imaginable thing. They're an albatross around the neck of Americans, but the rulers in power don't see them that way. They see them as kind of an arm of the American empire in the Middle East. But it seems like, again, Israel has more control over this country's policies than vice versa. It is actually the hardest thing, despite on paper it not being the hardest thing, but that's if we lived in an ideal world. When we actually had sovereignty, we actually had a president with virtue acting for the benefit of Americans that don't want anything to do with Israel anymore. We're sick and tired of Israel and its attachments and the ramifications on us, not only in terms of foreign policy, but in terms of debt and inflation, the curtailment of civil liberties, attacks on free speech, etc.
Would that be so hard? If Ghana was doing this to us, we'd say, hey, Ghana, stop it. But we're not doing that with Israel. And because we're not doing that with Israel, the Israelis feel completely free, not simply to make public announcements that they're going to pursue their own interests to the detriment of ours, but to humiliate the U.S. government and our nation by so doing. This is a feature that may be unique to Israel, hard to know exactly, but it's certainly the most obvious feature of our relationship with Israel, which is an ongoing humiliation process. We spoke 2 days ago to the former interim president of Israel, Avram Berg, former Knesset leader, a guy who knows Israeli politics and culture. He's in his 70s. He's born and lived there his whole life, knows the country well. And he noted unprompted that a feature of the way that Israel deals with other nations is humiliation. It's not simply enough to come to terms. You know, we're both a little bit dissatisfied. That means it's a good deal. You often hear that. That's not the Israeli view. The Israeli view is I have to crush you. I have to put my boot in your face. I have to diminish you. I have to humiliate you. Now, who knows where that comes from? But you should know it as you watch the interplay between the United States government and the Israeli government, because there's a whole lot of that. And here's a perfect example. And this is both a problem, like a tactical problem for the U.S. government, like how do you strike a peace deal with this kind of stuff going on? We'll show it to you in a second. But it's also a deeper problem for us. Watching your country get humiliated by a tiny country in a faraway place and getting no explanation for why they're allowed to do that.
That's all Americans witness. It's a giant humiliation ritual. Not only in the optics, you have presidents, prominent members of Congress going and touching the wall, crying at the wall. Do Israelis do that at like the Washington Monument? No. This is a humiliation ritual to show that you have bent the knee to the Israel lobby, that you side with Israel above your citizenry, not only in that humiliation PR ritual, but also delivering policies that the Israelis want, that Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and Larry Summers and Larry Ellison and Bill Ackman want above American citizens that elect you. And this, again, this war in Iran is the ultimate manifestation of that. This is part of the clean break strategy, aiding and abetting the genocide in Gaza, making excuses for it, giving Israel intelligence, and siding with Netanyahu on everything he wants to do, above everyone else in the world. Netanyahu, a vile war criminal, siding with him above everything else. It's an ultimate humiliation ritual, indeed.
Humiliates you and discourages you. And if you watch it long enough, you start to lose faith in your own nation. You start to become humiliated yourself. So we could pick a million examples of this, but here's one. So Monday, the president, before markets open, which was interesting, announces that the United States is pulling back from his promise to start hitting civilian infrastructure, energy infrastructure in Iran. And we're doing that because we're going to try and find some negotiated settlement. And we've been talking to the Iranians, and there is a way out of this. We don't have to get to the point where we're waging total war, not just against the government of Iran or the Ayatollahs or the theocracy or whatever we say we're doing, but against the people of Iran, turning off their electricity, ending their drinking water, letting them die of exposure or whatever. Total war against a country of almost 100 million people. And nobody wants that, or at least no one should want that. So the president announced, hey, we're in talks, we're pulling back. But within just a couple of hours, our partner in Jerusalem, Benjamin Netanyahu, the guy we're in this war with, issued this statement. Listen carefully.
מוקדם יותר היום שוחחתי עם ידידנו הנשיא טראמפ. הנשיא טראמפ מאמין שיש סיכוי למנף את ההישגים הכבירים של צה"ל וצבא ארצות הברית כדי לממש את יעדי המלחמה בהסכם, הסכם שישמור על האינטרסים החיוניים שלנו. במקביל, אנחנו ממשיכים לתקוף גם באיראן וגם בלבנון. אנחנו קודשים את תוכנית הטילים ותוכנית הגרעין עד דק וממשיכים לפגוע קשות בחיזבאללה. רק לפני ימים אחדים חיסלנו עוד 2 מדעני גרעין והיד עוד נטויה. אנחנו נשמור על האינטרסים החיוניים שלנו בכל מצב.
You could see there before he talks about this, Netanyahu said, we're taking this opportunity to strike not only Iran, but Lebanon, to expand their territory in Lebanon. They literally want to annex all the territory in Lebanon south of the Litani River. Smotrich has been emphatic about this, talked about this in person 2 or 3 days ago. So look this up. It isn't a conspiracy theory. They're extending their territory in pursuit of greater Israel, while U.S. servicemen take damage for them over Iran. When we expend vast amounts of treasure, up to $200 billion that Trump is asking for now, the same amount of money that essentially went to Ukraine over these last 4 years of disaster there, and the attachment to that alliance, that is what the United States is doing. But I will say to Tucker that it's pretty plausible that Trump is in on this, that this is part of the joint plan between Netanyahu and Trump, that there's not much distance between them, and that Netanyahu's response was made in secret in concert with Trump, and it doesn't really defy Trump, that Trump's in on this too. Trump is a traitor too. I'm sorry to say, I know Tucker has an attachment to him, and maybe by doing that, he speaks to a larger audience than he otherwise would. But I'm sorry, Trump's just in on it too.
We're safeguarding our vital interests, the prime minister of Israel said, our vital interests. Now, what are those vital interests? Well, no one's really explained that. Not even clear the Israeli public really knows the extent of their own country's, quote, vital interest as envisioned by their prime minister. We're not really sure. But clearly they entail territorial expansion, moving the borders of Israel outward, taking other people's land. And they're saying that in the Israeli government. This is a win because we've moved our borders outward.
Yeah.
So we're paying for that. We're making that possible. As Americans die, and a number have died in this war, Israel is using that opportunity, our money, our weapons, the lives of our soldiers, to expand its territory. So that's not our vital interest. You can agree or disagree with that. And by the way, if you've been yelling about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you should probably yell about this because it's even less defensible, really. But they're saying that, and no one in the U.S. government has told them to stop.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what you have. Israelis realizing their territorial ambitions and territorial dreams at our expense, that they're just part of the welfare state, that Americans have their wealth seized by the IRS, in some cases up to something like 40 or 50% of your total wealth when it comes to the IRS, plus inheritance taxes, capital gains taxes, state taxes, local taxes, occupational licensing taxes, all sorts of other taxes that go into the equation. We have our money robbed by us to funnel to this foreign power to expand its borders at our expense while our service members die over there for this fruitless and senseless affair, which, by the way, looks to be escalated soon with a ground invasion force. Trump is sending 82nd Airborne and Marines into the region for possible deployment. It looks like that's in the cards right now as we speak. So yeah, this is a slap in the face of Americans by Netanyahu, but Trump's in on it too. The Trump administration, the deep state, the Israel lobby, the military-industrial complex, the bankers that always profit off these lucrative ventures of bloodshed and turmoil around the world, they are slapping regular Americans in the face on this. This is part of their scheme to enlarge under Greater Israel. This idea and conception that Israel will grow beyond its current boundaries, maybe even incorporate all the land from the Nile to the Euphrates. That's what many of the ardent Zionists believe was bestowed to them as a promise to Abram by God, even though it wasn't bestowed unconditionally, and that has been fulfilled. If you're a Christian, you believe that the gospel's for all. Israel, as it's conceived of in Galatians 3 and in Galatians 6, is not a landmass. It's not an ethnicity. It's actually those that choose to follow Christ. If you're a Christian, that's what you believe. But nonetheless, people just take that promise to Abram when there wasn't even a kingdom of Judea, there wasn't even Jews for 1,000 years after that, and say, yeah, this is the promise to the Jews. No, it was a promise way back then to Abram and his descendants. It wasn't unconditional. Read Micah and Jeremiah and Isaiah if you think that that promise was conditional. It turns out the Jews perverted that so many times, even way back then, and it doesn't apply to modern Israel. This is just a stupid sacramental attachment that perverts our sense of justice, our sense of reality, American values in general, and what Americans want the government to actually pay attention to. It's our needs. It's not the needs of Benjamin Netanyahu, of all people, and the desires that he has to topple neighboring regimes that he sees as a threat, but pose no threat whatsoever to the United States. And all the neocons have co-opted Trump, but the old right would have had nothing to do with this. The Pat Buchanans, the Robert Nisbets, the Richard Weavers, the Russell Kirks, the Robert Tafts would have had nothing of this war. But modern conservatism, Inc. has been totally captured by the neocons, by the Zionists that always launch wars no matter what. Even if the candidate that launches them built his political career in many ways back in 2016 by saying Iraq was a big fat lie. We were lied into the Middle East. We shouldn't have done that. It was a debacle. It was a disaster. But no matter who you vote for, you always get Benjamin Netanyahu. That's what we're seeing now. So Tucker is right. I think he minimizes Trump's role in this. Trump is obviously part of this, and there is no leverage used by Trump against Israel. That is his ostensible decision-making, but it's because that they're Israel and they're not Ghana that Trump behaves this way. And most U.S. presidents have behaved this way to lesser degrees, by the way. You can just say no to Ghana, but saying no to Israel makes you persona non grata in the giant toxic swamp that our overlords swim in every day. That's the truth. But what do you guys think? Do you think Tucker Carlson's right about this? Do you think that Israel is taking advantage of the United States during this war at our expense? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Good video here. Really appreciated the segment. Well articulated, though minor disagreements with Tucker on this one. Also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. Doing that makes you a member, giving you access to special badges, and you get immediate access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to watch those members only videos right away. There's always several of them for you to watch before anyone else. Please do that if you're interested, and I appreciate you if you do. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. That'll send you to a website. You just plug in your email right there, and I'll send you a full free copy of that book. No obligation whatsoever. And look, I have a few demands from the sinister, Netanyahu-loving, evil Israel First regime, and I won't apologize for them. No more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.